Appointments expected to be cancelled.
Well, joining us in the studio now is junior doctor Bhasha Mukherjee. Good morning to you. Very, very good to have you with us. So why have you personally decided to go on strike?
For the same reasons why all of the other junior doctors who are striking are doing the same. Is to protect the NHS, essentially. And we care about the patients as much as the other person. And ultimately, this is about the future of the NHS and protecting the NHS, retaining doctors, and that's the same reason that we're all doing this strike.
I suppose a lot of people would think it's hard to square that circle of an idea of protecting the NHS when we've learnt this morning that each striking doctor is costing £3,000 for the NHS for these replacements to come in and try and provide a basic level of service.
Ultimately, we have to see this, that we are the employees and ultimately the taxpayer is paying towards the government who are in charge of where the money is spent. And at the moment, the NHS is struggling. And that is because of losing doctors every year. We're losing thousands of doctors every year. The strike is just to say, this is enough. We're losing doctors. The doctors who are staying behind are inevitably having to work harder and harder to fill those spaces. And actually, it's just a failing system we're just trying to uphold. And ultimately, we're all getting burnt out. Lots of doctors are considering leaving and going abroad to work abroad. And this will just carry on if we don't stop it here. And make it a reasonable reason for people to stay behind and actually work in the NHS.
I mean, the NHS, as we always say, is a system on its knees, isn't it? And when Tom talks about £3,000 a shift for replacement cover, is it moral to charge that much for cover for a system that's already on its knees?
Well, ultimately, think about it. This should have been dealt with this time last year. We've been having this discussion for years now about making it fair, and we've spent almost £1 billion this year on just filling the gaps in the rotas for these strikes, where that's about how much it would be to to give the junior doctors the pay restoration, essentially. So it is actually the government that they're making these choices. And from just the conversation you guys were having earlier, no one's happy with what the MPs are doing, and they're not filling their roles properly. And ultimately, if you think about it, the taxpayers are paying towards, this lump sum, and how much is being spent on MPs? £86,000 MP.
That is down in real terms over the last 10 years. MPs, if their pay had kept up with inflation, would be over £100,000 a year. But because inflation has been so high over the last year or so, MPs' pay in real terms has been cut compared to where it was a decade ago.
They've been receiving a 5% increase, while we've been receiving a 2% increase every year with 9% inflation. But then MPs get covering costs for their staffing, their office supplies, their travel, and various other things. We don't get those
Just
perks.
looking at where an MP salary might be, £86,000 a year, which is around £20,000 less than it would be if it had kept up with inflation. Looking at where consultants earn, that's much more than MPs. MPs on 86, consultants could be on 120, 130, 140.
Who would you trust with your life?
I think that's a very fair point. But isn't it the case that a lot of these people going on strike are incredibly well paid, some of the best paid people in the country?
It's not about the individual amount they're being paid. It's about making it fair for everyone and stopping them from leaving the workforce, essentially. We're getting paid much less as compared to other parts of the world for the same job. And essentially, what is stopping the doctors from just leaving and going to these other countries? It's called the mass exodus of junior doctors for a reason, because thousands of doctors are leaving the country. Why would they stay? So we want to give them a reason to stay. This is why we're striking. That's essentially it.
Do you feel like your aim can actually be achieved, though? When you hear from Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, his latest statement, he spoke about junior doctors getting an average pay rise of 10.3%, an average of 8.8%. The lowest paid will get 10.3%. He said that's more than what most people in the UK are going to be receiving. If you're in the private sector, you might be lucky to get a 2% pay rise. What do you say to that?
I would just say that it's a case of, meeting meeting what we're asking for. The government hasn't even come forward to actually have a discussion with us. And all these numbers are just flying around, but there's not been a formal discussion and a formal negotiation with everybody in the room to discuss how we can make the situation better.
I suppose that offer of over 10% for the lowest paid junior doctors, over 8% on average, it's a similar deal that was offered to nurses, of course, who accepted that deal, who have ended their strikes and who are getting on to work. Why is it different for doctors than it is for nurses?
I can't speak for the nurses, of course, but I know that it's taken a lot for 70% of the junior doctors in this country to strike for 6 months. And then, you know, we've reballoted and chose to strike again. And this shows that there's a solidarity amongst us. We all feel undervalued at work. And I think we have decided on that number together with the BMA for a reason. And it's reasonable because of the 26% overall pay regression that we've seen in the last 10 years. And this is just to meet up to that, ultimately.
How difficult of it was the decision for you personally to go out on strike? I mean, you took a Hippocratic oath.
I didn't.
You didn't?
No, we don't have to do that.
You don't need to do that anymore. But you ultimately care about patient safety and you care about people. That's, of course, why you decided to become a doctor. So it must have been a very difficult decision to decide to walk out.
I care about my patients whilst they're under my care. Ultimately, I'm an employee, and the NHS it's an organisation that's run by the government. They are in charge of the NHS. We are just employees. We work for the hours that we work, and we're responsible for our patients until they're under our control, obviously. This isn't just a case of, you know, I can't be sitting here responsible for every patient everywhere at all times. And the strike motions there, you know, it is within our rights to strike for essentially, you know, we're not happy with the conditions that we're working under.
OK, Bhasha Mukherjee, really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your company. Well, do let us know what you